Did you guys know there's a DC villain called the Dummy? Well, there's actually two, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, and I'm not talking about Batman's ventriloquist and Scarface here. No, these characters are completely unrelated to that pair of mooks, and predate them by quite a few decades too. In fact, the first Dummy made his first appearance all the way back in 1941. His grand debut took place in Leading Comics #1 in a tale scripted by Mort Weisinger and penciled by Mort Meskin. Ah yes, the two Morts. Anyway, it's a Vigilante story. No, not that one. This guy, the original old Wild West themed Vigilante, Greg Sanders. And in case you don't know who he is, it's pretty simple. He's a 1940s-based crime fighter with a cowboy theme, slinging twin six-shooters and usually riding a motorcycle instead of a horse. Anyway, in the first issue of Leading Comics, he faced off against a mysterious new criminal known only as the Dummy. He's called that because he hides behind the facade of a ventriloquist dummy, or so everyone believes. Later in the story, we get the shocking twist that the ventriloquist dummy is actually him. He's just a little short dude who for some reason looks like a wooden dummy. He's not a dummy though, he's a flesh and blood human. Possibly. The true nature of this fellow is kind of mysterious and they never truly confirm nor deny what he really is. So his very first scheme is to kidnap rich people and replace them with statues, claiming he turned them into stone. The dummy then demands a ransom for turning them back to normal. Naturally, this little operation of his is busted up by the Vigilante. I don't know why he bothered with the statues and the silly turn into stone malarkey. Hasn't the dummy heard of a good old-fashioned kidnapping? He already had those people in his capture. Just say that and demand a ransom. Well, I guess I know why they call him the Dummy. Following this tale, the Dummy reappeared numerous times throughout the 40s, becoming one of the Vigilante's most recurring rogues. In one of these stories, the Dummy seemingly went straight and retired from crime after being released from prison. But it was all just an act, part of his latest criminal scheme, and back to the slammer it was. Perhaps his greatest and wackiest accomplishment during this era was getting his hands on a time machine and sending each member of the Seven Soldiers of Victory back to different time periods. The Seven Soldiers of Victory being a team of heroes that Vigilante was a member of. It also included Green Arrow. The Dummy's last Golden Age appearance took place in 1946, and after that, he simply disappeared from the comic scene. We never really learned anything about him during this era, not even his real name. Well, get used to that, we still don't know anything about him. While the Vigilante's Dummy was missing, Batman faced another criminal going by the name the Dummy. This took place in Batman 134, published in 1960. These two characters are often confused with each other, but they don't really have any relation despite being very similar and using the same moniker. This guy actually has a real name, Danny, and he's known on the stage as Danny the Dummy. He's a performing ventriloquist, his gimmick being a reversal of the usual ventriloquist and dummy setup. He's the ventriloquist, and it's just a short guy who again somehow looks like a wooden doll, and the tall fellow is the dummy. This is revealed in a twist at the end of each of his performances. People still refer to him as the Dummy though, shouting Danny the Dummy whenever they see him. Well, turns out little Danny has a massive complex and freaks out about this, deciding to become a criminal, vowing to make dummies out of regular tall people. Yeah, that's about as weak of a villain motivation as you're gonna get. Well, at least he has one, unlike the other Dummy. Naturally, Batman and Robin beats the crap out of this pint-sized crook and brings him to justice. That was the only appearance the second Dummy ever made. He has not showed up since. I wonder if Bill Finger, who wrote the story, was even aware of the original Dummy when he created this one. Probably not. I chalk up their similarities to coincidence. The original Dummy finally made his return in World's Finest Comics in 1977. By this point, he had been gone for over 30 years. Now the old Golden Age relic found himself in a much darker DC universe, as evident by this grim tale. In it, the Vigilante returns to his old haunts, years after being gone, and finds his trusty sidekick Stuff murdered. That's right, Vigilante had a kid sidekick, and his name was Stuff. Well, it turns out that Dummy is responsible for the heinous crime, and Vigilante must now team up with Stuff's son, Stuff Jr., to get revenge on the murderous little gangster. This monstrous act cemented the Dummy as the Vigilante's arch-nemesis in most readers' minds. You would think the character had a big resurgence after this, wouldn't you? Well, sorta. But because there weren't really any Vigilante stories being produced, the Dummy had to appear elsewhere. In 1986, he appeared as a member of Mr. Mind's Monster Society of Evil, facing off against the Justice Society in the All-Star Squadron series. In this comic, the Dummy appears more dummy-like than he ever has, and at one point he also passes right through Alan Scott's energy beam. Remember, Alan Scott's ring has a weakness to wood. Again, like how it always is with this character, they don't clarify anything and leave it ambiguous. But the hints that he's an actual dummy have never been stronger than here. 2 years later, the Dummy showed up again as part of a supervillain team, this time as the leader of Injustice Unlimited, facing off against Infinity Inc. This time he's back to his more human-looking self. In 1995, the Greg Sanders version of Vigilante finally got his own self-titled series courtesy of James Robinson. It was only a 4-issue miniseries though. Kind of funny that a character who's been around since 1941 only has one 4-issue series to call his own. Anyway, the Dummy appears in this series as a hitman for the mob who's hired by real-life gangster Bugsy Siegel to take out the Vigilante. Well, this series did nothing to boost the Vigilante's or the Dummy's popularity, and to date, this was the last time the Dummy made any appearance of significance. Yep, in 1995, 30 years ago. A different take on the character briefly showed up in a Shazam comic in 2020, one that's actually made of wood. Apparently he was cursed by a wizard to live inside a wooden doll. Beyond a small cameo, this incarnation hasn't showed up in anything else since then though. Well, I think this is a cool character. A slightly creepy, mysterious villain who may or may not be a living doll. I like the ambiguity. I don't think you should explain anything about this guy. That would ruin his mystique. Of course, that does come at the cost of him getting developed and fleshed out. But what are you gonna do? You can't always have everything. His greatest disability is probably being shackled to the Vigilante, an obscure hero not many people care about, especially not after the second, more popular Vigilante was introduced in the 1980s. And I use the term popular generously here, as he is pretty obscure too. And let's not forget Arnold Wesker, another ventriloquist-themed villain who's outshined the Dummy by a long shot. Personally, I feel they're different enough to coexist, but I have a feeling most people would disagree and consider the Dummy superfluous. Will the Dummy ever return in a significant part? Well, who knows. Anything is possible. If the Greg Sanders version of the Vigilante comes back, it's very likely he'll take the Dummy alongside with him. What do you think about the Dummy? Which version do you like the most, the Vigilante one or the Batman one? Let me know down in the comments.